How's it going, everyone?
Hey.
Hope everyone is well. Yeah. Here we have Justin and Eleanor on the call as well. My name is Alan. Yeah, maybe since we cannot hear you, maybe you can say where you're tuning in from, and maybe you can quickly say where you heard from Food Forest Abundance. That gives us an idea.
Yeah, just go ahead and type that in the chat for us.
That's right. And we'll give 5 more minutes for other people to come in. Ana Maria, Florida, received the Food Forest Abundance emails. Great. That's awesome.
Hi, Ana Maria. Hi, Mark.
From Pulse City, Florida. Awesome. A lot of Floridians.
Canada.
Kelowna, Canada. I don't know where that is. Where's Kelowna? Hey, Carla. Hey, Leanne from the UK. Awesome, Leanne. Hawaii. Elena. Awesome. Kevin or Kev from Portland, Oregon. Learned about FFA with Jim Gale. Spoke during the last event last year. The event last year. Okay, yeah, great. Hi, Nina. Indian Rocks Beach, Florida. Awesome. Audio is not working for me. I guess other people can hear us, right? My dad, Philip, right there. John from Texas. Douglas, how's it going? Fellow designer. Carla, Okanagan in British Columbia. Okay. Okay, Ana Maria can hear us. That's great. Okay, yeah. Terry from Kansas, heard about you from the permaculture sites. Okay, which permaculture site? And we're going to be talking about permaculture today, so that's great.
Safari. Okay, she's using Safari.
She's using Safari and it's working for her, but I think Michelle is having issues. Okay, Michelle can hear us now. That's great. Liz from Texas, awesome. Great. We'll give it a couple more minutes.
And
Elena,
Alan,
Hawaii, awesome. That's my mom.
Alan, Justin, where are you calling from?
I am in Costa Rica, San Jose, Costa Rica.
And I am in Southern California.
Awesome.
Nice.
And Eleanor?
I am in Rome, in Italy.
Wow. You're like a triangle. Nina, we're in Costa Rica. I'm in San Jose, in Curridabat, in the eastern part. Nina. Hey, Michelle from Massachusetts. Where are you, Nina, at? Northern Kentucky. Shout out to Teiji Zurzuki and Pablo Kalig, my autonomy friends who are already on board with FFA, Pablo in sales and TJ in installations. Awesome. All right, welcome to the team, Adam. Yeah. I'm coming to Costa Rica in September. All right. Well, we'll have our contacts here. So yeah, you can let me know if you need anything from here. Still the rainy season in September, but it's nice. Pura vida. Pura vida.
I want to come to Costa Rica next year, maybe December to March, somewhere around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
You can tell me.
That's a nice time because it's not raining. Well,
okay, cool.
That's the dry season, yeah. All right. So yeah, we're 5 minutes into it, so we're gonna get started. Yeah, hope everybody's well. So I guess I'll start presenting. Okay, this isn't. I click something else. Add material. No. All right. Let me know if you see my screen. Maybe some thumbs up. Can you state your names? So my name is Alan, and then we have Justin, and then we have Eleanor.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Nina.
Maybe we could quickly tell people who we are. So I'm Justin. Great. I'm part of the marketing team for Food Forest Abundance and for Galt's Landing. I'm also one of the cooperative partners.
Go for it, Eleanor.
Okay, so I'm Eleanor. I'm a designer for FFA, and I'm also on the education team with Alan.
Yeah, my name is Alan. I am the education director and also a designer here at Food Forest Abundance. And I'm originally from Uruguay, and I'm living in San Jose, Costa Rica. Yeah, so to kick it off, we want to make this interactive. We want you guys to participate. Carla says that your volume was a bit low for a sec.
Okay.
Simje, awesome. So yeah, we want to make this interactive. We'll see. We want you to add questions and comments to the chat to make it more. Yeah. Also, like there's also like peer-to-peer collaboration too, right? In the sense that we can learn from each other as well, and also that creates like a little like an internal community here in this talk. So if you have a question, it helps us identify the question if you type it in all caps. So then we can mark it as a question and answer it on spot if it makes sense, or we can stage it for the end of the call where we have a section specifically for questions. Questions in all caps. That's right. That's the example right there. Lead by example. Awesome. So today, we're going to talk about a subject that is, kind of like dear to our hearts, because it's kind of like what we use as a main frame to do our work, basically, to organize ourselves as a company, and also to do our designs. We use permaculture as kind of like our guideline, and permaculture is Justin will go into this a little bit more, but basically it's a set of ethics and principles that help us like design our life, design our food systems, and these ethics and principles come from ancient traditions, and also from nature specifically. By observing nature, we can understand kind of like what she's doing. So we'll go into the permaculture ethics and principles, and then we'll go into how we gather this information from nature, so basically nature's patterns, and then we'll give you a sneak peek of how we start combining these into our permaculture designs. So hey, Lisa from Central Texas, you're right on time. So yeah, let's jump right into it. So Justin, go for it.
All right, well, here's our objective. Obviously, food forests everywhere. But first, an announcement. So Food Forest Abundance and Galt's Landing is proud to announce that starting the first week of June, we are going to be hosting tours at Galt's Landing. And these tours are going to be called Galt's Walks Tours. Galt's Landing, as some of you may know, is just a demonstration site where we're trying to show an alternative way of living, where each property has their own food forest. It's completely off-grid and basically totally awesome. So to start, the tours are going to be happening 3 days per week. Just some features about Galt's Landing is that it's 52 acres. We have a 430-acre lake, and so far 2,000 square feet of food forest. So we're not totally ready quite yet to have people sign up for tours. Still need a couple more days to work out some of the technical details. But very, very soon we should have the landing page up where those that are interested will be able to go and register for a tour. And if you look at the logo, please don't go to galtslanding.com. That's not actually a domain we're using anymore. When we have everything set up, we'll send you all the details, including the link to the page.
For now, people can, if you have questions, you can send us a message through our contacts, which we'll show you at the end of the presentation, or you can go directly to foodforestabundance.com.
Yes.
I'll put them.
All right, with that being said, let's jump into today's presentation. We're just going to start off with a basic definition of permaculture. So before we actually define permaculture, it's important to break down where the word permaculture actually came from. So originally it came from just combining two words, permanent and agriculture. But over time, as many people started applying the principles to growing food forest, they realized that the ethics and principles of permaculture applies to a lot more than just growing. In fact, it applies to nearly every other aspect of life as well. So more often than not, nowadays, the word permaculture is broken down differently. Instead of meaning permanent in agriculture, it's oftentimes broken down as meaning combining the two words permanent and culture. All right, so here's a definition for permaculture. It's the conscious design and maintenance of agriculturally productive systems which have the diversity, stability, and resilience of natural ecosystems. It is the harmonious integration of the landscape with people. Permaculture provides their food, energy, shelter, and other material and non-material needs in a sustainable way. All right, so there are three basic permaculture ethics upon which everything is based. So number one is care for the planet. Number two is care for people. And number three is fair share. Now, before you take out the pitchforks, we're going to elaborate more about what fair share actually means. All right, so fair share has nothing to do with communism or fascism or the state using violence and coercion in order to get what they want. And to prove that that's not what it's about, if that's what we were advocating, that would violate the second ethic of permaculture. So if fair share doesn't involve violence, coercion, or theft, which the state often engages in, then what is fair share exactly? Let's start with a quote by Bill Mollison himself, the founder of permaculture. So in terms of fair share, what he says about it is, by governing our own needs, we can set resources aside to further the above principles. And when he talks about the above principles, he's talking about the other two principles. So care for people and care for the planet. So basically he's saying once we have our own needs fulfilled, then we could share the abundance with the planet and with everyone else. It's a matter of putting your own mask on, you know, like on an airplane, for example, in case of an emergency, putting your own mask on before you put a mask on someone else. So just to further clarify what fair share means, it's about returning surplus to the system. Take what you need and pay it forward. So you share the surplus, not because you're being coerced or threatened into do it, but you're doing it out of the recognition that doing this is what is in the best interest of others and yourself at the same time. So it comes from a place of compassion, of naturally just wanting to help once your basic needs are already met, not because you feel like you have to out of guilt or because someone else is making you do it. So some examples of this are just starting community gardens and donating food and also composting. Because when you're sharing, you're not sharing with just people, but you're sharing with the planet to produce compost. And then that compost is able to produce food for the future for you as well. All right. So why do permaculture? Why is any of this important? So according to the UN, and I know, some of the data that the UN provides is questionable at best, but given where we are now, it's the best we have at the moment. So they say that there are only 60 harvests left worth of topsoil, which isn't too much until there's no topsoil left that we can use to grow. As a result, it's destroying every aspect of our life, the planet, the soil, our health. And tilling is actually one practice that's pretty harmful that traditional farmers use. And although it has a little bit of a political slant to it, a documentary I do recommend is called Kiss the Ground. You can find it on Netflix. It's something that Woody Harrelson actually narrates, but I think it's actually pretty interesting. So I would Highly recommend that. Kiss the Ground is what it's called. So if we stop doing what we were doing, we would actually end up doing the opposite. Instead of destroying the planet, our health, and our soil, we would be able to replenish the topsoil, and as a result, positively impact our health and our freedom at the same time. But it's a matter of knowledge. If we don't know enough about natural growing systems, if we don't understand the permaculture principles and ethics, you can't have one without the other, then if we don't know that, then we can't actually reverse the situation that we're in. So with that, let's get into the 12 principles. All right, here they are, the 12 principles. So I'll give you a second to quickly read over that. We're going to go and talk about each one individually, so don't worry about trying to copy this down or anything. Let's start with the first one, observe and interact. So this principle is calling us to be highly aware of what we're doing when we're trying to grow a food forest or maintain a food forest. It's calling us to develop a higher degree of consciousness for whatever actions that we're taking. For example, we're not just going to go out into our yard and say, okay, I'm going to put this plant here and this plant here and that plant there just arbitrarily, because nothing gets optimized that way. So part of observe and interact is to actually have the knowledge to know where plants need to go for a food forest to become optimized. Do you want to say something?
This is the probably like the most important principle, in the sense that like it's like kind of like constant, right? You're always observing kind of like what's going on. Once you start setting up a system for yourself, you start like understanding kind of like the wider system. Ideally, you understand the wider system and then apply it in yourself. But sometimes it happens the other way around, that you start setting up a system, a growing system, and then you start seeing how like it relates to like the macro system, and then your observation muscles keep on developing and you start seeing different things. So observation, we a lot of times in the classes that we do, we design and also like recommend people to do a sit spot, so they can actually go and like relax and basically take in like the elements, so they can see what's going on, what's working, what's not working, and then based on that adapt their system or the plan. So
yeah, very good. And you want to use the scientific method as often as you can. So you got to go back to 6th grade. At least that's when I learned the scientific method. Isolate variables, use control groups. So if you've forgotten that, it might be a good time to refresh in your memory as to what that is and how to use it. For example, a little while ago, I planted banana trees. Yep, the trivium, like Adam says, very good. So I planted banana trees, but they weren't doing very well. And I didn't exactly know why. I didn't know if it was the soil, if it was my water, if it was the weather. So instead of trying to change everything at once, I changed one variable, and then I tested it again with new banana plants to see if that actually addressed the issue. And it actually worked. See, if I would have changed all the variables at the same time, if I would have changed my water, the soil, and planted at a different time of year, then I wouldn't have known exactly what worked. But by changing one of those variables, I was able to find out that the weather was the problem. So that's an example of using the scientific method.
Can you hear me, guys?
A little bit.
Yes.
A little bit.
Okay. Now can you hear me now?
Much better.
Okay. So yes, what I was trying to say before, but I think you didn't hear me, was that when I have a design and when I have the chance to be on the land, I actually go in the woods and see the pattern of trees that are working together, because there are some pattern of trees and shrubs that are really repetitive and that can work on the land. So you can use local species, to try to start creating biodiversity on your land. So this is another interesting way, go in the forests or go in the woods that are close to your place and see what are the trees that are living together, and try to replicate it in your on your land.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. Natural systems are an excellent teacher if you know what to look for. So just do what nature is already doing. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. In fact, none of us would recommend to try to reinvent the wheel. Nature knows best. All right, number 2, catch and store energy. Energy is all around us, and a lot of the ways that we can capture energy is just simply using the sun's energy in different ways. Especially if you live in a sunny environment, it's what makes the most sense. So this one's pretty self-explanatory. All right, obtain a yield. And when people think about yield, they oftentimes only think in terms of tangible items. So that would just be simply food from your food forest, water and energy. But when you go through this process of growing your own food forest, there are many intangible benefits as well. And we did talk about this in the last webinar, but it's important to emphasize. It's important to go over again. There's good physical health, mental well-being, community, a sense of purpose, happiness. All of those I would consider to be a yield as well, other than the healthy food that you're getting from your food forest. Self-regulation and feedback. There's so much you can learn if you just simply ask yourself the correct questions. So some examples when something doesn't go right, some examples of questions you could ask is, where did I go wrong? What did I do? What did I do right? What do I still need to do? And based off of the answers to these questions and using the scientific method of isolating variables, you can calibrate and adapt and do what you need to do to really optimize growing your food forest.
And this goes, in alignment also with like what Bill Mollison was saying, right? Of like kind of like self-governing, or it's important that we can self-regulate as well. That we understand like kind of like our limits, like other people's limits too, and then like operate there. So constantly like giving like like asking the right questions, like Justin is saying. So understanding like our boundaries and how we can improve, but also like accepting feedback from our community, being open to that. I think like there's a lot of kind of like the topic of like nonviolent communication here as well that we can apply, so we can kind of like live harmoniously with our ecosystem and with our communities. Yeah.
And I think embedded in this principle as well is, don't get attached to the way that you're doing things now.
That's right.
We
always evolve.
Yes, always evolve. If you find a better way to do things, maybe it'll take you a little bit more work to learn how to do it that new way. But if it's the most optimal way to do something, then it should be done, especially if it increases your yield.
And it's, if I can add something, Justin, it's okay to get mistaken, because when you get mistaken, actually, what's working, what's not working, right? So you can try and experiment other things, and then you become a mentor for the ones that are actually going to do that mistake. But then you tell them, okay, wait, that just happened to me, so maybe you can do things differently, right? So it's really, yes, Elena, you learn by doing. That's it. And it's okay to get mistaken, like there is no mistake, there is learning. If you get this approach, then you are always a winner, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a way of reframing it in your mind. If you fail, you learn.
Exactly.
And if you win, then obviously you succeed and you get the result that you want. Either way, you win.
Exactly. It's like not seeing failures as a negative thing. It's just like a step in the journey.
Yeah, definitely. So the next principle, use and value renewables, sun power, wind power, water. We need to be using everything we can, especially if we're wanting to increase more freedom and eat healthier food. The decentralization of energy production is absolutely critical. The next one, produce no waste. So given how a lot of us live right now, this one could be pretty difficult, and it might take some time in order to actually adopt a lifestyle where we're producing no waste. But in the meantime, we could figure out ways to reduce waste. And some of the ways we can do that is to stop purchasing a lot of the things we don't need. That's a very easy way to do it. Carefully choose who you do business with. And then in terms of food forests and permaculture, just compost everything you can, because that will just end up being recycled back through the system and continue to produce more yield for yourself. Number 7, design from patterns to details. So look at the big picture first and then dive into the details. Don't get lost in the trees. See the whole forest first. So it's a matter of knowing when you need to zoom into the details, but still keeping the big picture in mind, and then knowing when to zoom out. But from that zoomed out perspective, don't lose the details at the same time. So it's this balancing act that you're playing between these two different perspectives. And I like tying this into holistic health, since this is what I have some experience with. If you really want the whole body, mind, and spirit to work harmoniously, you can't ignore any of those 3 aspects of yourself. So for example, if you leave the mind out of your healing process, your body will suffer and your soul will suffer. If you leave the body out of your healing, then eventually your mind will suffer. So everything is interconnected, and which means that everything must be treated in a holistic sense, because there is no separating anything. And the same thing goes with permaculture and growing food forests. All right, number 8, we have integrate, don't segregate. So there is strength in diversity. And proof of this is the companion tree planting that is oftentimes used in permaculture. So this is a picture demonstrating that. We have the apple tree in the middle, and then we have a whole bunch of other plants around it that support the apple tree in some way. So get plants to collaborate and cooperate with each other whenever you can, because that's oftentimes what leads to the most ideal scenarios in terms of growing.
Here, I'll comment on that. Basically, like, there's also a Bill Mollison attitudinal principle. These principles that we're showing right now were developed by David Holmgren. And there's also some like attitudinal principles that Bill Mollison, kind of like the founder of permaculture, or the person that coined the term, used. And one of them is turning the problem into the solution. A lot of the times, especially in our modern systems, whenever there's a problem, we try to eradicate it. So we try to cut and like remove. So that would be like an example of like, segregating. However, in permaculture, we see like turn the problem into the solution. So like, how can you incorporate the problem? So like, a classical example in permaculture is, for example, you have an orchard, and now you have like suddenly you have like a slug problem, right? And the slugs, they're eating your produce. So you're like, what should I do? The typical thing is like, okay, try to eradicate the slugs, right? pesticides or something, and kill the slugs. However, somebody would say like why didn't you integrate some animals or like a natural predator of the slugs, such as ducks or something like that. So now you have like you're creating a solution from the problem, and you're making your system more resilient as well. So this is a classical example, but like you can think anytime you have a problem, is like kind of like what Justin was saying, right? Whenever you have like a health issue, instead of like trying to just eradicate it, like think about like how is that like informing you, or how can you integrate that information to you to make yourself more resilient? And the same with our growing systems. So I really like this principle.
And in the meantime, if you're trying to get ducks or those predators that slugs are just eating your vegetables, you can use beer as a palliative and temporary solution in your garden. Like you just put 1 glass of beer here and there, a little bit buried in the ground, and then slugs will come in the beer and your vegetables will be fine.
They'll have a party.
Yeah.
You create a slug party.
The slug's always looking for a good time.
And what I discovered is that when you just get rid of that really full pot of dead slugs, and then you throw it at the feet of your fruit trees that are actually attracting those big wasps, well, it smells so bad. Those slugs smell so bad of decompositions that actually those wasps won't come. So you will have your own fruit from the tree. This is just a tip.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Very good.
Finding different little solutions.
All right, moving on, because I feel like I could talk about slugs for a long time. Just make slug jokes the rest of the presentation, but we won't do that. So number 9, use small, slow solutions. Don't try to do everything at once. And if, as an example, if you want to use an analogy, what happens when you try to eat too much food at the same time? What happens when you bite off more than you can chew? Well, you risk choking on the food and potentially dying. So you don't want to be doing that. You want to take small amounts of food, take the time to chew that food, and that way you can safely digest it. So if you don't move slow, if you move too fast, you might find yourself in an unmanageable situation. So if you're just getting started in permaculture, in food forests, for example, you don't want to immediately move onto a 30-acre farm and then start trying to manage that. It would be much more intelligent to start with just a few plants in a very small space, see how that goes, and then scale that. That way your risk is low and you don't find yourself in a bad financial situation later or a bunch of dead plants.
It ties really well to like the principle of observe and interact. So that if you have a smaller system, it's easier to observe and then make adjustments, and also with the principle of like applying self-regulation and accepting feedback. If you have a small feedback, you get like quicker feedback, so then you can readapt. Normally, we work whenever we do a design, we do a design for the entire system because we like to think on at a system level. But we always recommend to do the installation in phases. So like as we do the installation, then we understand like what's working, what's not working, and then we can make adaptations.
If I can add something about small and slow solutions, there is something really interesting that actually happened in one of my designs. And so I was, I know a friend in Mexico, and he has a big coconut palm field. And he had a field close to the beach with no coconuts, and he just planted coconuts, right? And it's just all monoculture of coconuts in the Pacific Mexican coast of Oaxaca. And then what happened is that his baby trees didn't survive. while, I mean, there's just a lot of big coconuts growing everywhere. So then he went to the old man's, and those guys told him that actually what they do at the first one, and yeah, like just before planting the coconut palm, they cut in little cubes those cactuses. Let me just show you a picture. Those ones, right? Nopales or opuncia. And then nopales. And they cut those cactuses in little cubes, and then you will have this gel, right? Retaining water. And they will put it in the hole before planting. So the palm, the baby palm, will actually reach for the first 1 or 2 years, will reach those little cubes, right, of water, and then will thrive for those 1 and 2 years while the baby palm is developing the root trees. Okay, and then eventually it will just find water, and the roots will find their way to water. But then these cubes help for the first 2 years. So this is a problem of drought, right? Because there is really not much water in Mexico at this time of the year. And I had the same problem in Corsica, in France. So I just did the same thing. Why? Because there were nopales as well in Corsica. And I said, okay, let's just do it here also with it was a raspberry planting. And, it's like intercontinental, but then when you observe and finding that a solution is working, then you can repeat it where this local resource is available too. So yeah, it's a small solution, but it's working, it's artisanal, but it's how men did for thousands and thousands of years.
Yes, exactly. When you've proved that you can replicate it, then that's when you start scaling. All right. So number 10, use and value diversity. Similar to one of our previous principles, integrate, don't segregate. So it's important to recognize that each plant, even if you don't realize it at the time, plays a very unique role. And it's up to you as the designer or the installer to understand what that role is and how to incorporate that into your system. But you need the knowledge first in order to do that. Without a knowledge of permaculture or of any of the design skills, then it becomes very hard to use this principle, but it is an important one to implement. All right, use edges and value the margin. This is great for people that have very small spaces. This is great for people that don't have 30 acres of land, for example. And I really like the pictures that I included in this slide, because in the first picture, it's an example of someone taking it vertical, even if they don't have the horizontal space to be able to do it. They use the space that's above them in order to get around that. The second picture is a great example of using the edges. See, there's a lot that's crammed into that corner next to that window. And as long as you're using that space, you have, any additional space is just going to be bonus. So I encourage everyone to just get as creative as they can, because there's a lot more space than might appear. All right, the last principle, creatively use and respond to change. I feel like we've been hammering on this, pretty hard throughout this presentation, but it's important to recognize that nothing stays the same. For one reason or another, conditions will change, the climate will change. It's up to you to adapt and see the change as an opportunity to deepen your learning and to become a better installer or designer. And you have no idea how that kind of knowledge might serve you in the future as well. So don't see change as a bad thing. See it as an opportunity to learn and to become a better version of yourself and to do your job better.
I would say embrace change as the dynamic evolution of your life, you know?
That's right.
All right, with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Alan.
Great, thanks, Justin, for going over those. Yeah, so that's basically the framework that we use as permaculture designers, as food forest designers to make our designs, but also to slowly those principles start like permeating in everything that you do in life, and they're pretty handy. Our chief storyteller Jim Gale, you know, he printed out his principles and has them on the wall, and those are the guiding principles to direct food forest abundance, you know, on this journey. So yeah, they're pretty powerful. So now we're gonna see like the context, you know, of like where all these principles and ethics come from, which is nature. And Eleanor is gonna give us a beautiful presentation on like this journey through nature, especially through understanding nature's patterns and how we then bring those into the work we do.
Okay, so let's go through it. So nature manifests herself through patterns, you know. Everywhere we look, we can see repetitive geometrical forms that are everywhere. And actually, this is a study that was known in ancient China as Li, right? So we can find patterns everywhere in nature, and it goes from micro to macroscopic. And they are just the divine manifestation of the cosmic order in which energy aligns, right? So it's really mathematical, actually. And if we take, for instance, the pattern of spiral, we can find it in the tiny, tiny ammonite fossils here on the left. So it's really small scale to all those super large scales of cyclones that we can see from a satellite. And those patterns actually are governing those geometrical shapes that we can call fractals, that are, those shapes appearing similar at various scale levels, right? And we talk about maths because there is one number that actually is governing all this, and is the golden number, phi, 1.618, etc., until infinity. And it's governing also the Fibonacci sequence. And this is what we call the divine proportions, okay? And the Greeks were using those divine proportions to build their temples. And we can find the divine proportions here on in each part of the human body, on the alignment of planets in the solar systems, okay? So they're really everywhere. And this is what gives nature a sense of harmony. So we saw the pattern of spiral being embedded in different elements, right, of nature, like the ammonites, the baby ferns, or those mega cyclones. But then we can have one single element that can take the shape of different patterns. Okay, so let's talk about water. We of course know water as drops, you know, like the spherical pattern. But then, depending on the level of energy and the conditions, those drops can just form other patterns. And when water freezes, it will form those beautiful and unique ice crystals, right? But then if these ice crystals receive more and more energy, then those molecules of water are just getting more space, and they are evaporating, and then they are forming clouds. And when it rains, those clouds come to drops of water, and they create those beautiful rivers where we can see those meanders that are actually curves. Those are patterns, curves, like the ones I have here on my digital prints. So we can find patterns everywhere, as we see, on this snake, on a tree, on stones also. Each crystal, amethyst or quartz, whichever salt, also has its own shapes, its own pattern, and it repeats from micro to micro scale. So here are the main patterns in nature, you know, spiral branches, explosive patterns like the garlic flowers, those curves. And in time, it's really interesting to ask ourselves, okay, if we have those patterns in space, what about time, you know? And in time, everything has a pulse. Everything has its own rhythm. The waves, the wind that is blowing, the wings of the birds, our own arts. So there's a lot of different times actually interconnecting and interacting every time. And there's a whole world of dimension intercrossing, right? So as designers and as just humans that are observing, we take a look even at the broader landscape. For instance, we take a look at forests, and forests make those clumps of trees when you look at them from above. We look at the curves of mountains and valleys, and we can intuitively know the pattern of water, where water is going to accumulate. So as human beings that are reading the land, and we've been doing it for thousands of years, we observe those slopes, the sun, the water features, from where the wind are coming, the crossing of animals, the weeds. Also, the weeds have their own patterns, you know, like depending on the type of soil, you can find different types of weeds. So Alan, I will just let you continue on that and give us the purpose of this observation.
Great. Yeah, exactly. So understanding these, and so we wanted to put these kind of like nature patterns also, because it's kind of like really all of our ethics and principles come from these, you know, understanding nature, and that's how they got really created. Bill Mollison was like an observer of the land, and also observer of like ancient traditions that, you know, were in really connection with the land and understand their flows and stuff. So now we want to show you how we bring this information into our designs, which we normally try to use, you know, we have the framework of all of our principles to do our designs, but also mainly we're trying to focus on the land, you know, and understanding the land and how it flows, and basically design so it goes in accordance to those energy flows. So yeah, let's go into it. So principle number 7 was designing from patterns to details, and we use that a lot in permaculture. And here you have some examples. There's one main pattern that we use in our permaculture designs, which is understanding kind of like the main framework of the site. And you can use that based on nature's patterns. And also one of the patterns that we use a lot is kind of like the human pattern. how do humans utilize a place? How do, how is the energy flow of the humans? And this decides how we break out the space into different zones, what we call them, so we can place our elements of design in a very energy efficient way. It doesn't make sense, energy wise, to have your kitchen garden all the way back of your land, far away from your kitchen, because you would never use your produce. You need to have that right next to your kitchen so you can actually use what you're producing. So here you have some representations on the left hand side picture. You have kind of like our center point being our house. So kind of like that's the concentration of energy, let's say, of a household, of a piece of land where you live. And then these concentric rings, which normally are not like that, because you can see the middle picture. Basically, like as we go out from the concentric rings, there's less human interaction. So the closer to the house, the more human interaction, and the further out, the less human interaction. And based on this, we can understand how we place different elements. So again, we first create the pattern of the site. So you can see that in the middle picture here, and then we go into all the details. So yeah, so after creating kind of like the main patterns, then we can start creating kind of like our smaller patterns, which are determining like the sequencing of different plants. We talked about in the previous webinar. We talked about food forests and how do we organize plants, in a nature way pattern, using biomimicry, understanding how the forest works. We have different layers and like the different collaborations of plants. That's a pattern, that we observe, and then we try to replicate in our food forest. So then we start going into details into our design, from our design patterns into our design details. So we're also designing through the not only in space, but we're also designing through time. Eleanor was talking about kind of like everything is kind of like in a rhythm and in a flow, and we bring that element, we bring that pattern into our design process as well. So the rhythms of the ecology of the land are kind of like a framework pattern, and we use that to then incorporate the details into our design as well. So so here, in those kind of like in those flows, we can understand kind of like how the water patterns are. In a lot of places we have like rainy seasons and then non-rainy seasons, so we can understand like how the water works, and then how does that affect the system. Eleanor?
Yes, and gills, that are those companion plantings that we put at the feet of the trees, are just most of them are perennials, but some of them are also annuals. So they are popping up at different moments, in time, and we can take advantage of them.
Yeah, and perennial plants are plants that kind of like you plant them and then they live for several seasons, for many years. And annuals or biennials are plants that have a cycle, right, of like growth, reproduction, and then death. And then they can, their seeds can like come back again. But so yeah, and then there's one system that we're working on a lot, that we work for a little bit bigger systems, which is a synthropic system, which puts all these elements, of like kind of like time and space. So understanding kind of like first the main pattern of the climate, and then understanding based on the plants that you're putting in, kind of like how they're going to be growing in collaboration with each other. So like one is going to be growing, it's going to be casting shade, then you're going to be cutting it off. Another one is going to be growing. So there's kind of like this rhythmical element that happens that we as humans participate in. We do like choppings, we do harvestings, we remove plants out of the system. So we're basically like collaborating in this kind of like nature dance. Again, by I think somebody before was mentioning agroforestry, And this is one of the agroforestry techniques, the synthropic agroforestry. And it's agroforestry because agroforestry is broad, but we focus on regenerative agroforestry techniques, and we can go into more detail into that. But yeah, basically, like we're participants of these rhythms, of these patterns, and the more we're in them, the more we understand them, and the more we can like flow with them too. So get out in nature. All right. Yeah. So, well, I'll leave it to Justin here, and we'll have like a section of like Q&A here in a couple of slides. But yeah, if you have any other questions, please keep on putting them in the chat so we can address them here in a second. So go for it, Justin.
All right. Here's how to connect. So first things first, be sure to get on our email list. To do that, all you do is go to foodforestabundance.com, scroll all the way to the bottom, and then as you can see with this image here, you will see the navigate menu. Just go ahead and click on join our email list, put in your email, and you'll go ahead and receive all the announcements that we have. All right, let's jump into the Q&A session. So what was your biggest takeaway from today's presentation? If there's anything that blew your mind, something that you wanted us to re-emphasize, and feel free to post about that, or also any questions that you guys have.
So we'll start with the questions that were posted throughout the event. So the first question was how is food forest abundance approach different than more traditional permaculture approach? I think in my mind the approach in like the design process and like an implementation is similar. Everybody has their own like way of doing permaculture, really. So there's no kind of like a traditional way, let's say. I would say like everybody has their own way. For me, the differentiator with food forest abundance is that Jim Gale was able to create a really simple message, which is there's something we can do, to help the world, to help ourselves, to help our communities, and that's planting food instead of having lawns. Because the lawns are, even though they might look beautiful and they might like create space, and there is places for lawns in our designs as well, but like a lawn is basically a monocrop, and normally it requires a lot of energy to be able to maintain, and we don't get any output from it. The only output that we might get is like aesthetics and like an open space. But like if we're thinking about like food production or like or being self-sufficient or being community sufficient, we need to produce food. And the suburban areas is now one of the founders of permaculture, David Holmgren, he's like advocating a lot to bring food production into suburban areas, and he wrote a book recently called Retro Suburbia, which is about that, kind of like retrofitting the suburbs, because the suburbs still have like a lot of space, a lot of green space to grow food, but they're still like within kind of like the urban setting. So there's like less transportation. You can get your food more directly. So permaculture is really broad, right? So sometimes it's hard to communicate to people the permaculture message, because it might get lost in too many details, But Jim Gale was like, hey, let's just use permaculture, but like the message is let's turn lawns into food forests. So I think that's the main difference that in the approach. So let me know, Adam, if that answered your question, and if Justin or Eleanor, you want to add anything to that. Okay, so Leanne said, are permaculture, agroforestry, and food forest essentially the same thing, or just with similar linked principles? Yeah, all of these practices have like different principles. I would say that like permaculture could be like an umbrella for all of these. The principles always within these systems are pretty similar. For example, we build food forests using permaculture principles, and actually the food forest is something really used by permaculturists, because it's like a companionship of plants that like make the system better. Agroforestry, when referring to agroforestry, I think you mean like regenerative agroforestry, because agroforestry can be like just like planting monocrops of trees, and then I guess there the principles don't really apply. But I think permaculture could be like, you know, an overarching umbrella of all these systems. We use all of these systems in our designs, you know. Eleanor? Or
there is another question from Pete. He was asking about observing what is naturally thriving in a forest. What if, I'm just going to post it, what if most of what is thriving is not edible? How can we correlate what's thriving naturally with what we want to grow nearby? So actually, it depends, because a lot of those species that we have in the forests are edible and are medicinal. So for instance, when I was just walking in the forests, let me find the patterns here. So I was looking at the trees, and actually there were those chestnuts that are edible. And with those chestnuts, there was holly, which is medicinal, hawthorn, which is medicinal, hazel, which is edible, and elderberry, which is medicinal and edible. So sometimes you just need to be interested in what your local species what properties, you know, you can find in the local species of your area, and just get interested into this. Go to the grandmothers and to the grandfathers. They surely know. And this is a really simple thing to do, you know, just be aware and try to investigate and interact as much as you can.
Yeah, and then I also there's also a methodology called analog agroforestry, which is kind of like doing a biomimicry of the forest, but substituting species for more productive and commercial species to create like kind of like an influx of income to communities. This started like in regions in the forest in Ecuador, for example. And the idea is to like mimic, you know, kind of like the functions and the structures of the trees and the plants in the forest, but like with plants that you can like commercially create a yield from. So it's basically like applying biomimicry. But yeah, we talk a lot about this. One of the shifts of perception when trying to be, you know, community resilient or community self-sustaining or self-sustaining, is you need to understand like the resources that are in the forest. There's a lot, like Eleanor was saying, there's a lot of resources that we lost, you know, on the road that we don't know can be used, and we need to like bring that back. We just need to like kind of like unlearn and then like relearn from the nature way.
There's another question from Pete. He was asking, do you designers have any basic templates of complementary tree, plants, animals for different areas, environments? Yes, we do. We are working with those and always incrementing that list. And depending on the zones that we are working with and the climates, we have different bases.
Different plants or different combinations of plants.
Yes. So yes.
Yeah, and we're like in constant development. We're I guess we have like a group of designers that are like, we're coming from all places and we're all integrating ourselves into the system to create all of this documentation. So yeah, if you have any specific questions, Pete, let us know. We can chat offline. Gozda said, the land I want to buy to build my food forest has a marble factory nearby. Does that cause any problems? I don't know specifically. I don't know what a marble factory does, and kind of like what are the, you would have to see like what the outputs of the factory are and how they're like releasing them to the land, to see if like they go through your land, you know. And the outputs can be like putting things into the waterways, putting things into the soil, you know, having any exhaust systems or whatever it might be. So, or even, you know, noise, you know, if you have like a big like factory making a lot of noise and you're trying to build this paradise, you're gonna have to have a big noise breaks, big trees that can be incorporated into the design too. But yeah, so maybe understanding kind of like what are the outputs of this factory is going to inform that.
For sure, yeah, you need to understand if they are using chemicals to just dissolve marble so at some points, just to, or how they are carving it out of the stone mother stone. For sure, like the sound can be very annoying, and also the dust, you know, you need to see if there's a lot of dust, and also you will have probably a lot of trucks passing that way. So yeah, make sure to understand how this factory is working, the days of delivery, and all of this, and maybe you can find solutions.
And then the last question is from Pete. Does FFA subscribe to any tenets of Finherd Institute growing with positive intention type of philosophy? Not particularly, but we're open, you know. We're open to, we are really an integrative group, you know. We have like people from like all over the world and all walks of life, and yeah, we try to integrate all the things and all the teachings that each one brings to the table. For example, one of our installers in Wisconsin, Ricky and Will, they like to do like the setup of the land, you know, the earthworks, the structures, the paths, all this stuff. Like at the beginning stages, set everything up, and the day of planting, they like to bring the community together and do kind of like a celebratory thing, you know. So like, yeah, the energy is good. So there's like, you know, yeah, good energy for planting these plants, so that gets transmitted to the plants. So yeah, we're open. I don't know exactly. I've heard of the Finherd Institute, but I haven't really gone deep into it, and I don't know exactly its tenets. But yeah, I think we would be open to learning from it.
There's this question from Lean. Maybe did you address it, Alan? Are permaculture, agroforestry, and food forests essentially the same thing? Okay, so then we have this question of Adam. How is the food forest abundance approach different than a more traditional?
Yeah, we addressed that one, the first one. That was the first one we addressed.
Okay, so I didn't hear those questions.
Cool. So yeah, so these are the ways to connect with us. Justin, do you want to do a recap on these real fast?
Yeah. So the first entry here is if you want a professional to come and design a food forest for your property, then that is something that Food Forest Abundance does offer. So to do that, just go to foodforestabundance.com, and in the navigation menu at the top, you just click Buy Blueprint, and then it'll take you to the page to do that. So pretty straightforward. So this option is mostly for people that just want to move fast. You know, they don't want to take the time to necessarily learn all this on their own and become professionals. So we offer the professionals for you to get started growing as quickly as possible. The next option is the Abundance Ambassador option. So this is basically just the affiliate for those that are familiar with internet marketing. So every time, for the people that you refer to us, every time they purchase a design or install a blueprint, then you get a part of those. You share in some of the profits for that. So that's our Abundance Ambassador program. And if you scroll up in the chat, I did post these links. So you'll be able to just click those links instead of having to copy and paste it in your browser. Then we have the option to become a cooperative partner. So if you're interested in your local area in installing food forests, then you could sign up with that link, the foodforestabundance.com/grow with us. And then we could, take care of you that way. Lastly, any other questions? Maybe there's some questions we didn't get to. In order to get an answer to your question, you could go ahead and contact with us. And that link is at the very bottom, foodforestabundance.com/contact-us. And that is another link that I post in the chat. So I think we're good to go.
Awesome. I'll just address Leanne's question real fast about animals. Yeah, Leanne, we just need to make a site assessment to make sure that putting livestock at the beginning makes sense. Livestock is really good for regenerative purposes if it's managed well. So yeah, we can go more in depth into that if you contact us. All right, everyone. Yeah, thanks for participating. Please let us know if you have any questions. Yeah, feel free to contact us. And yeah, until the next time, we'll be doing these webinars once a month. We'll alternate between Fridays and Saturdays, so different people can attend at different times. Yeah, until the next time, take care, everyone. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye. Thank you for attending.
Thanks for attending.